Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to go through today the quadratic formula. So we've been looking at solving quadratic equations. So let's say we had an equation like x squared plus 5x plus 8 is equal to 0. So remember the steps for solving this. First step was make one side equal to 0. That's already done for us. The second step is to factorize. The problem with this is I can't factorize this because I don't know two numbers that multiply to 8 and add to 5. Factors of 8, 8 and 1, don't add to 5. 4 and 2, don't add to 5. So, don't know what to do. We need another method. So there is a method that you can use to solve any quadratic equation, or at least it will tell you if there are no solutions, right? That's what we want. The problem is the formula is very complicated. That's what we're going through today. There is a formula you can use to solve any quadratic equation. So, any quadratic equation can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So this is what you use after you've got one side equal to 0. So a is the number in front of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the constant term. Remember, if a equals 1, then it's monic. And if a does not equal 1, it's non-monic. Okay? So it turns out that the solution to a quadratic equation is entirely determined by the coefficients a, b, and c. So if ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, this is a quadratic formula, and I'm sorry, it's complicated. So the solution for x will be minus b plus or minus, there are two possibilities here, the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Okay, this is a very, very handy tool. Factorizing is simpler. It's much easier to understand, but unfortunately it doesn't always work. So, we're going to use this formula to solve quadratic equations. Now, here we have the square root of something, b squared minus 4ac. So we refer to b squared minus 4ac. That's the discriminant. So if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, then there is one solution. If b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, that's when you get two solutions. And we saw in previous lessons that sometimes you get one solution, sometimes you get two solutions. Okay, so the reason for that is we're square rooting something. If you square root 0, so if this whole thing equals 0, there's only one solution. Square root of 0 is 0. If you square root another positive number, there are two possibilities. So if you square root 9, the answers are 3 and minus 3. So that's why if this is more than 0, this thing under the square root, if it's more than 0, there are two solutions. You know, square root of 16 is positive 4, also negative 4. But remember, you cannot square root a negative number. So if the thing under the square root is less than 0, there are no solutions. Remember in a previous video I told you sometimes there are no solutions to a quadratic. And this now tells you why. So I'm just going to fix this up so you can see. So it's b squared minus 4ac, the thing we're talking about. Okay, so for example, if you have x squared plus 1 equals 0, that has no solutions because x squared would have to be negative 1, and you can't square a number and get a negative answer. So there are always 0, 1, or 2 solutions. If you're using the quadratic formula, it's usually best to check what b squared minus 4ac is first before going any further. Let's try this equation here. So if I have x squared plus 5x plus 8, a, the number in front of x squared is 1. If it's not written, it's 1. B, number in front of x is 5. And c, the number by itself, is 8. So b squared minus 4ac, that is b squared is 25, 5 squared, minus 4 by a by c. Put that on your calculator, you get -7. B squared minus 4ac is less than 0. It's negative. That means that this equation here has no solution. There is no number you can substitute for x to make that thing equal 0. None at all. Let's try another example. So let's try x squared plus 5x minus 8 is equal to 0. So here, a is still 1, b is 5, but c is turned from positive 8 to -8. So in this case, b squared minus 4ac would be b squared, so 5 squared is 25, minus 4 by a by c. And if you put that on your calculator, you get 57. So that's clearly more than 0. So now this should have two solutions, okay? But I can't really factorize because I don't know two numbers that multiply to -8 and add to 5. Turns out they're going to be irrational. So let's use the quadratic formula to find what those numbers are. So x will be minus b plus or minus the square root. Now we just figured out b squared minus 4ac is 57. So I put 57 there. Over 2 times a, which is 1. So there are two solutions here. I have minus 5 plus the square root of 57 over 2. The second solution is minus 5 minus the square root of 57 on 2. Let's put these both on our calculator. So I put the top one on my calculator. The answer I get is about 1.3 to 1 decimal place. Okay, it's an irrational number. The decimal actually goes forever. Now I'll put the second one on my calculator. So I go minus 5 plus the square root of, minus 5 minus the square root of 57 divided by 2. The answer you get should be about minus 6.27, so about minus 6.3. I mean, we never would have guessed that, minus 6.3 times 1.3 gives -8 and minus 6.3 plus 1.3 is 5. We wouldn't have been able to guess those two numbers off the top of our head. That's why we need the quadratic formula. So please pause and copy this down. I'm going to do one more example. So let's have a go at this question here. 4x squared equals 7x plus 11. So this is a quadratic equation because there's an x squared term. We can't use the methods we used for linear equations. So to use the quadratic formula, one side needs to be equal to 0. So what we have to do is get everything over one side. So we'll subtract 7x from both sides first. And then we'll subtract 11 from both sides. That way, one side will equal 0, which is exactly what we need to use the quadratic formula. So here, we have one side equal to 0, so we have a is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the constant term. So remember the quadratic formula, x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So we just put in these three numbers into the formula. I did say it's probably worth your while to check what this is first to see whether there are any solutions. So let's do that. So here, b squared minus 4ac is b squared minus 4 by a by c. So if you put that on your calculator, you get 225. So that's easily greater than 0. So there should be two solutions to this equation. So let's actually find what they are. So we have x equals, so minus 7 becomes positive 7, plus or minus the square root of 225, because this is that. We just figured that out, over 2 times a. So the square root of 225 is 15. It's actually rational. Both solutions will be rational here. So my two solutions are 7 plus 15 over 8. And my other solution is 7 minus 15 over 8. So 7 plus 15 over 8 is 22 over 8. Or if you prefer decimals, it's 2.75. And then 7 minus 15 over 8 is minus 1. So these are my two solutions. They're nice, neat numbers we never really could have guessed from the equation. So we could have factorized this. 10A people could factorize this, but for those who haven't learned how to factorize non-monic quadratics, the quadratic formula is the way to go. It is a bit complicated and hard to understand, but practice, 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 because it makes solving quadratics so much easier. All right, thanks for tuning in. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.